Welcome. Appreciate y'all showing up. Late night at the Ledge. Doing this every Wednesday night. Definitely appreciate y'all showing up as y'all do. Every Wednesday night, giving folks a chance to get in here. I put in a Zoom link. So if you want to join me on chat, if I can figure out how to do it, I will. If I won't, if I can't, I won't, I should say. But definitely thank you for showing up. Definitely thank you. Thank you for showing up. Wednesday night, late night at the Ledge, Wednesday night. My name is Conway Jr. Appreciate you guys showing up as you always do. Every Wednesday night we're doing this. Thank you for taking some time out of your evening on a Wednesday night. And I'm not just doing this just because, but before I get into all of that, let me say thank you. Thank you to the folks on LinkedIn that's sharing these videos. Thank you for the folks on IG that's sharing these videos. Shout out to Equally Yoked and Reform. If you haven't done so already, make sure you go to imac.org, go to the storytellers page. And if you've had experience with federal supervision being violated while on supervision, so make sure you click that link. How are folks dealing with school being back in? How are folks dealing with this whole crazy hurricane? Apologize again for last week. Hurricane Ida crept up on us. I apologize. I should have been more prepared, but I wasn't. And speaking about being prepared, this week we've had a very clear example of the power of laws and power of, us knowing the process. One of the reasons I'm doing this series, and folks asking, why are you doing this series? And I'm doing this series because many people do not fully understand how a bill moves from conception of an ideal through the governmental process of becoming a law. Maybe if we knew more about the process, we could have stopped the abortion bans in Texas. We could have had some impact on gun laws and voting laws across the country. I remember being in a room where they were doing a legislative training. And I remember feeling very belittled. I remember feeling very, I didn't know what was going on, and I was being talked to as if I didn't know what was going on. And as a result, I didn't engage in the conversation. And there were conversations that were happening that I knew were not beneficial to folks like me. But because I didn't know the process, I didn't engage, right? So I know that there are directly impacted people, justice impacted people that want to engage in advocacy, but simply don't know how or where to begin. So I'm starting at the basics. I'm not really, we'll get into the organizing, we'll get into the tactics and the strategies, but I think it's important for us to really know the basics. Before I even decided to run for office, what gave me the confidence to run for office is that I had passed some legislation. I had been part of that process. I had led that process. I didn't just, decide to run for office for some capricious or ambitious reason. I had actually, pushed legislation on the municipal and state level. And as folks see, state law chips away at the Constitution, or it undergirds the Constitution. And I said I wasn't going to have much opinion, but in order for us to pass the laws that are going to be beneficial, in order for us to protect people that can't protect themselves via this process, we got to put people in office that speak our language. If you hear me talking about folks on the other side, I'm talking about folks who are on the other side of people power, folks who are on the other side of people having a right to do with their bodies that they choose. I'm talking about the other side of, that power gap, right? So anyway, who am I trying to reach? Directly and justice impacted individuals that want to organize and advocate in politically tough geographies. If you're in a geography like Texas, if you're in a geography like Mississippi, if you're in a geography like Florida, if you're in a geography like Iowa, Idaho, Utah, places where historically it's been tough to pass criminal justice legislation, then this is for you. If you're interested in restorative justice, ending that violent versus nonviolent dichotomy, I'm talking to you. If you're interested in ending the detrimental impact of legal systems, I'm talking to you. These videos are designed for you to help you. If you're interested in racial justice, systemic racism that morphs into hyper-policing and incarceration of Black, Latinx, people of color, and poor folks, then these videos are for you. If you're into equal justice, gender rights, these videos are for you. If you're organizing to end law enforcement Bill of Rights, policing, ending state-sanctioned violence on the above folks we just talked about, well, these videos are for you. And it's funny because I talked about the hurricane, and part of the process of cleaning up from the hurricane was sweeping out the water. Now, I don't know if you've ever swept water, but it's not the most, it's not, it's not as gratifying as you would think, because the more you sweep, you feel like the less you're doing. And sometimes getting a bill drafted can feel like sweeping water. I mean, it works, but not really. You kind of have to keep going over the same area. You make some progress, but ultimately you have to call in somebody to find where the water is coming from. Those are the policy folks. Those are the policy wonks. But once it's dry, you can fix the hole, but there's always a chance that there's another leak, an attack on the community. And you have to be ready to sweep the water again. Go back to the ledge. And if you're gonna live in a basement or do your work in a basement, or if you're gonna work in tough geographies, then you're gonna have to have some basic understanding of how to do this work. Now, last week we talked about the legislative process. I gave some case studies. If you're interested in those case studies, please put something in the chat. If you are in, I saw some folks comment saying that we need this in our area. So if you're in a specific geography and you want me to concentrate on the legislative process in that geography, drop your state in the chat, drop your state on the comments, and we'll dig down into the legislative process in your state. Now, hopefully we'll get to drafting a bill, but we're going to really dig into the legislative process. That's all right with folks, all right? So thank you guys again for showing up. Wednesday night, late night at the Lege. As I kind of explained, we're doing this on Wednesday nights because this is when they pass these laws. They pass these laws at night. They wait until folks are asleep and can't attend the sessions. That's just how it's done, right? So what I want us to do is get used to kind of working the hours that they work when they start passing these bills, all right? So let's get to it. All right, how a bill becomes a law. That is going to be our basic topic of conversation. And if you want this presentation, please drop it in the chat that you want to see this and you want to have your hands on it, or if you want a copy of it. All right, I have the PDF for it as well. All right, so let's get to it. First of all, some of the things that we need to consider is I want to demystify the process. I want to make this process so, it's not some kind of enigmatic process where you don't know what you're talking about when you're talking about it. Like, if you talk to me about how to convert, solar energy into AC or DC, I can't tell you. So if you're gonna sell me a solar panel, you can sell me anything because I don't know what you're talking about. So true or false, anyone can draft a bill. True or false, there's only one kind of legislation. True or false, you can't draft a bill. By the end of our presentation, we will be able to answer all those questions. You will have a firm grasp on what the legislative process is. You'll be able to talk confidently in these rooms, and you'll be able to be of substantive value when it comes to strategizing on tactics. And then if you decide that you want to be a policymaker, well, it's be helpful to understand this process. All right. Every law starts out as a bill or some type of a bill. And it's a lengthy process. Like, it doesn't happen overnight, as you guys have seen. Some laws go through bills, I should say. Some bills go through many different iterations, many different transitions, and amendments. Goes in and out of committee, and it can take years, and many bills don't make it through. In some states, 1,500 bills are filed, maybe 500 are passed. So being aware that every bill that's filed does not turn into a law is important. Now, anybody can come up with an idea for a bill. Sometimes the most effective legislation, equal marriage rights, are the result of people advocating for what they need in their communities, whether it be for taxes, whether it be for healthcare, whether it be whatever that idea is. It can come from you, or it can come from your elected official. People who have ideas for laws can contact their official to discuss their ideas, and if they agree, they research the ideas and they write them into bills. Now, we'll talk more about that bill making process, that bill drafting process, because it is a process. But we'll talk more about that. So, true or false, only an elected official or representative can introduce a bill. There's a difference between drafting a bill, writing a bill, and introducing a bill. A bill officially comes to life when it's introduced. That doesn't mean it's going to have a long life or it's going to about to become a law, but it begins its life as a bill. So only an elected official, true or false, can represent or can introduce a bill. Well, that's true. A bill can be introduced in either the Senate or the House of Representatives, regardless of the source of the proposed idea. Now, once it's written to a bill, it can go through the process of becoming a law. This begins when someone introduces the bill in the House or the Senate. Now, a bill can start in either of these chambers, but it must be approved by both. Now, as you remember, we talked last time, as a strategic advantage, sometimes it makes sense to introduce the bill in both chambers. In case one stalls out, you have the other. And this is why it's important to kind of know where and who can introduce these bills. So when you're having that conversation and you're saying, hey, I think we should introduce this bill in both chambers, you can say why. Now, there's a little different process as I talked about before in the Senate and in the House. When the bill begins in the Senate, the members must gain recognition of the presiding officer to announce the introduction of the bill on the hour. If any senator objects, the introduction of the bill is postponed. Now, again, the Senate makes up their own rules. The House works, the Senate is supposed to be very refined. They're supposed to be very, very stately, and the House is supposed to be, kind of off the chain a little bit. Well, in my experience, the Senate can move at a very fast clip. So you have to be very, very aware of the process. Now, just like, as I said before, either the Senate or the House, the process is the same. The Speaker of the House may set time limits on committee. Bills are placed on the calendar of the committee. Wait a minute, committee? What am I talking about? Exactly. Before anything happens, the bill goes to committee. You know, committee is where I really want y'all to really kind of understand the process, because that committee process is where bills die. If nothing happens while it's in committee, that's the equivalent of that bill dying. If y'all are trying to kill a bill, you want to get it caught on the calendar of the committee to which it's been assigned. You want to have a relationship with the chair of that committee. Now, sometimes the bill it goes to two committees, right? It goes to I say one committee as a broad committee, a judiciary, and then it'll go into a select committee of that judiciary or of that specific subject, right? As it says, bills may be referred to more than one committee, and it may be split so that parts are sent to different committees, particularly if it's going to have some funding attached to it or if it's going to affect funding. Committee action. Now, before we even begin, talking about what happens with the bill becoming a law, the committee action is where it happens at. The bill is reviewed by a small committee in the Senate, which discusses the pros and cons. And here the smaller group researches and refines it, then decides whether to bring it to the full Senate. Now, if that happens, all of the senators vote on whether they want the bill to become a law. Now, this is when you hear folks say it's had its second reading. This is when you'll hear folks say it got voted out of committee, right? And so those are steps. There are steps that happen along the way that gets the bill out of committee onto the floor. It gets the bill out of one committee into the next committee. Hearings are a large part of the committees, and hearings are where you as an advocate or you as someone directly impacted, you can have an influence on the process. Now, oftentimes, this is usually the only place where directly impacted folks, justice impacted folks are able to engage. But as I discussed with you earlier in the earlier videos, once you build those relationships with staff members, you'll be able to talk about this bill before it even gets here. And you will be able to have a conversation so your champion will be able to go into this committee with the kind of information that they can really defend the bill or they can oppose the bill. There's a markup session. This markup session usually results in amendments. Those amendments have to be voted on or they have to be gleaned. And sometimes you'll end up having a new bill that's introduced with proposed amendments. You have to be very, very, what's the word I want to use? You got to be close to this process. You really have to almost be kind of a pain, right? And really stay on folks, your lobbyists, stay on your policy person so that you know what that bill looks like after those proposed amendments. All right, that's going to be important. In the Senate, now the entire Senate debates this bill. And when I tell you, as you've seen it, this debate can turn into something that either propels the bill forward or stops the bill. On a federal level, you see us still talking about voting rights. You see us still talking about immigration rights. On the local levels around the country, North Carolina just passed a law that makes sure that folks with felony convictions can vote. In New Jersey, the governor just signed a law that allows, that disallows landlords to use your background as part of the rental process. But all of that comes as a result of the debate in either the House or the Senate. Now, when it comes to funding, or if a bill has what they call a fiscal note, the debates get heated. You know, it really gets to a point to where some folks use what's called a filibuster. And lately, you may have heard about Democrats wanting to end the filibuster because it's really one of the most historical, it's one of the historical ways that folks on the other side, whichever side you're on, but usually it's the right side, have used this tactic to stop legislation that will alleviate some of the pain, some of the disenfranchisement. In many cases, it's civil rights laws were filibustered against. There was a threat to filibuster against the voting law. The filibuster has been used. So I'm introducing you to these terms so when that you hear them, you know what they're talking about and how to strategize around it. All right. Now, the House of Representatives, it goes through the same process. You examine the bill in a committee, and then you hold a vote in the full House. You'll hear the first reading, second reading. You hear about a floor vote. You hear about it getting voted out of committee. You hear about it getting sent back into committee. Now you understand what they mean, right? So when a bill goes to committee, at least in the House, it's got to go to the Rules Committee first. And the committee adopts the rules that will govern a procedure under which the bill will be considered by the House. Now, the same thing happens in the Senate, but it's a little different. Now, the closed rules set strict time limits on debate and forbids the introduction of amendments. These rules can have a major impact on whether the bill passes. So what that means is if there's a powerful chairman, if there's a powerful, if this bill is fast-tracked, they're going to use this closed rule to make sure it doesn't get stuck on the calendar. However, it can work against you because if there's enough opposition, then they're able to stall it out by just simply voting against it. How y'all doing? Y'all, everything all right? Y'all drop some noise in the chat. Not like I can really check it, but if you're here, please drop a 1 in the chat. Tell me that you are here. If you are, again, tell me where you're showing up from, tell me what state you're in. And if you want us to concentrate on the legislative process in your state, let's talk about it. All right, so anyway, same thing as what we did in the Senate, we're gonna do in the House. And when I talked to you earlier about offering to introduce the bill in the House or the Senate, strategically and tactically, there's an advantage, as just as I explained to you, if it gets caught in the committee process, you can work the other bill and see if you have an easier way through what we call a pathway to victory. Now, true or false? Once the bill is approved by the legislative branch, it becomes a law. What do I mean by the legislative branch? Well, once it's been approved by the Senate and the House, it's gone through both chambers, they both voted on it, does it become a law? Well, false. Once the bill is approved by the legislative branch, it goes back to the governor or the president. And if the president does not approve, or if the governor does not approve of the bill, he can veto it by refusing to sign it. Now, you may have heard this, where particularly where there's a majority of one party that controls a certain house or a certain chamber, you'll hear about the governor or the president calling a veto. And this veto is kind of the executive authority to say, you know what, I don't care what y'all doing, I'm not gonna sign it. So you would think that that would lead us into an authoritarian state, right, where the president has ultimate authority. Well, not just yet. If 2/3 of the members of Congress agree, they can override the president. And what that means is this is the opportunity for you to really work your channels after the bill has kind of made its way through the process, particularly if it hasn't been signed yet. Now, what's tricky about the signing of the bill is if it isn't signed by a certain time, in some states, it's automatically enacted into law. In other states, if it's not signed by a certain time, that's the same thing as killing the bill. So you really have to continue to work your champions. You really have to continue to work your sponsors, even after the bills have made it out of both chambers, all right? So when we're thinking about how a bill becomes a law, let me get the last, apologies. Let me get this last slide for you. How a bill becomes a law, right? So if you want this slide deck, just lets me know and I'll share it with you. But I wanted to, again, talk to you guys about the process, really knowing how the bill goes through so you can talk the language, so you can feel comfortable using the kind of vocabulary that you need in your lexicon. When you're talking about the bill, when you're talking about where the bill is at, when you're dealing with these policy folks, sometimes you got to be specific. Sometimes you really have to use the language that they're used to using, otherwise you'll be talking into the wind. You know, again, my goal is to demystify the process. So it may sound pedantic, it may sound redundant. You know, you may have heard this stuff before, but that's good. Right? The more we practice, the better we get. We're going to dive deeper into drafting a bill. I'm going to show you examples of how a bill is drafted, but also you're going to get a physical example of how to track a bill. You're going to see what I just showed you, and then I'm going to show you what it looks like with an actual bill. And we talked about House Bill 577 on the first video. We also talked about SB 466. So I'm going to show you two bills that I was involved in, two legislative actions that I was involved in, and I'll show you how I was able to maneuver in a way to stop these bills. All right, and that's what this is about. Make sure you share these videos. If you have any questions, drop them in the chat. If you like what's going on, make sure, tell me about it. If not, if there's some changes you think I need to make, we're definitely open to changes. And again, I think we're going to begin to bring folks on who are experts in that area. So if you're interested in being on, make sure you drop it in the chat or send me a DM. You guys have an amazing rest of your evening. Thank you for showing up. Next week, we're going to talk about drafting a bill. All right, have a good one. Peace.